Reddit Rainbow here with a delicious serving of pro-revenge. Let's check out the first one. Never mess with a rancher and a neighbor. My father had the ultimate revenge when I was a kid. I grew up on a horse ranch in Colorado. We had a long piece of property, about 80 acres, and we raised Missouri foxtrotters. We had lived there for almost 20 years when some folks bought a strip of property way at the back of our land. It was a strange plot of land as it was very narrow, and was sandwiched between our back fence and a busy county road. We were surprised anyone would buy it actually, as it forced the house to be pretty close to said road. Well, we never meet these new neighbors until one day my dad gets a notice from a lawyer telling us that after having surveyed the property lines, our back fence encroaches on their property between 3 and 6 inches depending on the spot along the fence line. These folks had never met us, never introduced themselves. Our first introduction was this legal demand. My father was a salt of the earth kind of man, very kind, but also very strong-willed. He called these folks, arranged a meetup, and tried to talk some sense into them. First, did 3 to 6 inches really matter that much, and why had they not come to us to talk it through? He even offered a number of different compromises. These folks were hostile from the get-go. They demanded he move the fence immediately, or they would sue. Apparently the law stated they had to put their house so far away from our fence line, and they wanted to push it as far back from the road as they could when they built it, so they wanted that 6 inches very badly. I still remember when my dad got home from the meeting. He hung his hat up and shook his head when he told my mom in his slow way, "Well, looks like we got the kind of folks for neighbors you don't ever want to have for neighbors." They sued, and won, and we were forced to move the fence in 2 weeks. I say we because I was the free slave labor as all farm kids are in this kind of thing. All that fencing material, and the time, were a big cost for my family, but we got the work done in early spring. Here is where the fun comes in. So the new neighbors broke ground and built all through the end of winter and into spring. The very next weekend after they had moved into their house, Dad rousted me out of bed and we took the big truck into town to the lumber yard. I was extremely puzzled as we loaded up a bunch of fencing material and building supplies. We didn't have any big projects going that I knew about, and I kept asking him what it was for, but he just told me to wait and see with a devilish smile on his face. We built a pen and a small enclosure very near our back property line, directly behind the neighbor's new shiny house. The next day one of our farm friends delivered a half-dozen pigs to their new home. Dan insisted on feeding those hogs table scraps and all the things that would go in the composter, as well as some good balanced hog feed to keep them healthy. Now you may not know this, but the smell of pig excrement is directly related to what they eat, and their pen table scraps make them smell bad. I mean bad. I had to drive the four-wheeler back there every day to take care of them, and within a month halfway there and my eyes would start watering, it smelled so bad. When we mucked out the pen with the bobcat we also made the pile right next to the pen. I can't even imagine how bad the smell was living in that house. The neighbors, of course, freaked out, and again without ever even trying to talk to us, went the legal route. They lost. The area was zoned agricultural, and my dad had done his homework to make sure he was breaking no laws or regulations. The pigs were far enough from us, and our other neighbors that it didn't bother anyone but the people he wanted it to bother. Come fall when winter moved in, we sold the pigs to slaughter, and Dad stacked up a bunch of building supplies next to the pen and let the neighbors know we would be expanding the profitable operation in the spring when they came out to scream at him. He smiled the whole time, speaking in his slow, steady way. The new neighbors sold their new house in January, when the ground was frozen, and the new owners would not smell the pen. Though as soon as the old neighbors were gone we tore down the enclosure, spread the nasty stuff on the hayfield, and the new neighbors never had any bad smell come spring. They also were great neighbors and are still lifelong friends. Never mess with a rancher. Edit. Since I have gotten this question a bunch of times, this is what my dad proposed to the neighbor after getting the letter to move the fence, but before we ended up in court. He really did want to try to cultivate a good relationship with a new neighbor, even though they started on such a lousy foot. He offered to sell them 5 acres of land at the back of the property at a super affordable price so they could have a better plot, and get well back from the road. Our back fence line was almost 5 acres long, so it would have shaved an acre-long line off us all, and that was wooded land that was not good pasture land anyway. They were not interested. They had plenty of funds to BTW, as they were sitting on $1 million payout from selling their home in California, which we knew as they brought it up multiple times in the discussion. Statements that they had all the money they needed to take us to court if we didn't comply immediately. My dad asked if he could move the fence over time rather than being hit for the cost all at once. Ranches are not made of money. We could move the section right behind the proposed building site immediately to help with planning, etc. First, they were not willing to do that. It all had to be moved immediately. Lastly, my dad was friends with the 2 guys that did the inspections for the county for this kind of stuff. We had built many additions and changed on the ranch over time as well. They were all in the volunteer fire department together as well. He offered to get all of them together and see what options they had for dealing with the offset issue. The neighbor refused, again demanding the fence be moved immediately. If you see a theme here, so did my dad. There is no pleasing some people, so my dad let him take us to court. I later found out Dad was using the time to save up some money since he figured he would have to move the fence and that was expensive, and he hoped maybe the neighbor would not push it that far and come to work with him rather than go to all that cost. I know my dad reached out a couple more times to the neighbor before things went to court too. That was just tasty. Not only was that epic revenge, but I like how the dad tried to be reasonable with the jerks at first. He really did try to give them multiple chances to go a better route. They didn't want to play nice, so they got some pro-revenge instead. Let's check out the next one. Take my money, sell me crap, then be prepared to lose your business. So, a few decades back, I was involved with a group of guys with a little money and we wanted something substantial to invest in. We decided to buy a restaurant franchise, I will not even say what kind, as that could identify me. Well, everything was going along swimmingly, until my partners backed out. I, unfortunately, was the face of the group, and my signature was on the bottom line, so I got stuck with running the place. It soon became apparent that there were a lot of inconsistencies. The big number one was that the sales in the prospectus were nowhere near what was being generated. Then there were other things, customers calling for their regular order. Well, it turned out that my particular franchise had been used for the past several years to deal grass and various drugs. The former manager had made some serious coin, and was not happy that I had purchased his place. Well, life is not fun when you have just sunk 6 figures, and the likelihood is that you have flushed it down the toilet. However, I was not going to be trifled with. First, I called the accounting firm who signed off on the prospectus. The partner in charge was taken aback. They had never signed off. I presented myself in their offices, and spent the next few hours with them and their attorneys. Their name could not be associated with something fraudulent. Next, I wanted my money back, and the chief franchisor told me that they would immediately put mine up for sale, but the market was not quite as high as it was when I bought it, less than 3 months previously. Then the prick had the audacity to demand that I paid up for my last order from the commissary. Something else to consider. I took the price list provided by the central commissary that we as franchisees were compelled to use. Buying fruits, vegetables, cheese and meat from outside the system would be accompanied by fines from the franchisor. I marched myself back to the accounting firm, and asked for a bit of analysis. Turns out commissary prices were from 10 to 300% higher than market. In other words, the franchisor was not interested in food, they were interested in turning around franchises. Well, that little report found its way into the hands of 20 local franchisees. Suddenly, the central commissary was not being used. The district manager starts showing up writing fines. Turns out the district manager is the guy who was supplying the manager of my franchise. I have him on discarded VHS security tapes selling. So, I take the tapes to the accounting firm for secure storage. Then I go to the franchise's offices. I lay it on the line that I have their district guy selling drugs in my restaurant. They laugh at me, until I tell them that I am the one who supplied the report to the rest of their franchisees. Oh, and by the way, we are starting an action against you. I then showed them that we had placed liens on the building they owned, their commissary, their homes and their vehicles. I said I have enough to put you guys in jail. So, their mental giants sit me down, write up a little release, and go get me a certified check for every dime I put into the franchise. I agree to the release, however, they do not realize that the gouging, and the evidence is still in the hands of others. All they succeeded in doing was to get me off the list of owners suing them. Well, the case came to court. And who do you think was on the stand giving a complete rundown? One of them stood up in court and said, "Didn't we pay you to shut up? No, you refunded me the money you stole." Now they had 19 other guys taking them apart. I heard one of the franchisees cried when they took his Porsche. His wife left his soon thereafter. Oops, looks like that one wasn't thought through at all. I really enjoyed these pro-revenge stories. Which one did you think got more revenge? Do you agree with how they handled these situations? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you can get all of the notifications. Thank you for spending time with Reddit Rainbow, and we look forward to the next one.